Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the speaker and welcome to all participants in this room and also those joining us online today. My name is Sabrina Grassi. I'm the Executive Director of the Leenaards Philanthropic Foundation in Lausanne and board member of Swiss Foundations Association. I am pleased to moderate today this panel at the GESDA 2025 Summit on the role of philanthropy and private capital in a sovereignty-driven world. I would like to quickly remind you that you can contribute to the conversation on social media by following the hashtag GESDA Summit. You can find the full program, speaker's bio, and session details in the GESDA Summit app. So in the next 45 minutes together during this panel session, we will discuss how philanthropic actors and also how private investment increasingly step in to fund global critical issues such as scientific innovation, global health, education, climate resilience, as government retreat, shift to more sovereignty-driven political priorities, and thus government funding, public funding stalls. These private actors, being philanthropic or private investors, have a strong advantage, the one of being able to take risk, have a high tolerance to risk, be agile, and also be able to innovate, be bold, because they can mobilize various financial tools, not only grants, but also loans, private equity. They can participate to blended finance mechanism and have thus the potential to act as catalyzers to achieve a larger sustainable impact at scale. This implies, of course, building trust, collaborations as well, cross-sectoral collaboration, while ensuring accountability, legitimacy, and autonomy. So today we have three guest speakers from different horizons with us. Mr. Stefan Germann, to my left, CEO of the Ursimone Wietlisbach Foundation, established in Zug in Switzerland, active especially in health with a strong entrepreneurial spirit, which you will explain to us, and using impact investment and venture philanthropy. Then we have Mrs. Güler Sabancı, chair of the board of the Sabancı Foundation in Turkey, a leading foundation funding social education, health and cultural program, also owning a university. And then Mr. Adam Said, chairman and co-founder of ACE & Company, a private equity and venture capital group based here in Geneva. So I will kick off the conversation now. Starting with you, Mr. Germann, Stefan, can you explain to us a bit more about the entrepreneurial approach that you are trying to infuse at the Ursimone Wietlisbach Foundation? Because in addition to grants, you actively make impact investment with the endowment of the foundation. You also have experience in blended finance. You explained to me a first loss experience. Can you tell us a bit more, provide us some concrete example?
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I go into the kind of question at heart, I think we need to look at it in a bigger context of shifting, on one hand, geopolitics, but probably as well shifting the kind of international development paradigm. And I would call that as a shift from sort of aid to more impact-driven economic development trajectories. And I think what got lost, like in the communications earlier this year, as kind of US aid was gutted, at the same time, what didn't make the news is that actually the budgets for the Development Finance Corporation, the DFC in the US, was actually increased, which I think is symbolic for that shift away from aid to more sort of economic-driven development. Now, we could argue a whole week about, some of these shifts and how they happened. But I think the point is that we are facing so many critical challenges that we are not addressing with kind of grant money that a lot of from us as foundations or different actors are actually doing. For me, it's a bit like the image of like a big dam lake with a big concrete wall as a metaphor. And in front of that concrete wall, there is a few sort of sprinkling salad leaves in the desert growing. And the sprinkling is actually the kind of like grant money from us foundations. Just European foundations combined have probably around, the figures is hard to get, but 600 billion euros. But the sprinkling of the salad is very limited. What we need to do is open the floodgates of the capital and actually let the capital flow to create impact. And that's what fascinated me when I was asked in October 23 to start up the Ursimone Wietlisbach Foundation. And I had a very fulfilling, great job at Fondation Botnar, where we did as well partly impact investment. We managed to shift about 10% of the foundation assets into impact investing. But what really got me to take on that new role is that the Ursimone Wietlisbach Foundation has 100% of its endowment invested in impact investment through the Blue Earth Capital, and which is a Swiss-based impact investor, currently with about 1.7 billion asset under management. And the Ursimone Wietlisbach Foundation, funded by Urs and his wife Simone. And Urs already before had another foundation and invested all his endowment money into impact investment. And over the 10 years basically has demonstrated that with measurable impact, you can create market returns. So the story that you need to kind of like as a foundation with your endowment to make compromises on the return if you go into impact investment is just not true anymore. And I think that's where we need to now shift the narrative across Switzerland, across Europe, across the world, that unless we shift foundation and family offices capital to actually these financial flows to create impact that have societal benefits that are measurable and environmental benefits, we are still staying in that little drip irrigation of a few salad leaves. And that's just not what the world needs. I think what we need now is a really transformation of the financial systems into impact investment.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it's very important what you say, because if we take Swiss scale, it is estimated foundation grant 5-6 billion, but the asset under management of all these 14,000 foundations is over 100 billion. So it's really time to maybe shift the paradigm and start using the capital, not only the distribution, to create impact. And just a complementary question, when do you consider impact is achieved? Because I think you're trying to scale up initiatives. So what are the conditions needed to say, well, with that action, with using my capital, I have achieved impact?
What we are using as a lens is what is called systemic investing, which comes out of the Center for Sustainable and Private Wealth, now located at the University of St. Gallen. And a good demonstration of this, I would recommend you to look at a Financial Times article by Lucas Walton. It was an interview with Lucas Walton from the Walmart here. His approach is really embracing this for oceans, what is called systemic investing. For us as a foundation, systemic investing means that in the areas that we work, like we focus on complementary health and prevention, education and exercise and sport, that ideally, and we are not there yet, it's a longer journey, that basically all that we do as a foundation end to end, from the assets management, that we have investments that actually drives the societal change within that system that we like to change. Our research is contributing to that systems change. The policy and advocacy work that comes out of research to evidence, our grant making, basically end to end is contributing towards this system change. And so impact therefore is measurable within the system that we are operating in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'm turning to you, Mr. Said. Then, as a private investor, in your role, what objectives are you willing to achieve with your asset management, your capital allocation, to act maybe in public interest fields or trying to make breakthrough in science or other fields?
Well, thank you. First, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on this panel, and I want to applaud all the work that GESDA does in trying to anticipate science and diplomacy in the future. We try and do that as private investors, and we know it's a hard job to predict what's coming. So these type of conversations definitely help. When we talk about, so I'm definitely here representing the private capital part of the equation. And surely, and let's be honest, we're looking for returns. We are looking for compounding returns on behalf of investor, and that's our #1 priority. I like what was just said, is that there is an overlap now between returns and impact. You don't have to sacrifice one or the other. And let me get back to why I think that and why I joined that argument. First, when we think of private capital, the first thing I always like to do is try and divide the stages of private capital. Not all private capital or private equity is the same. You have risk capital, that's venture, you're trying to spur innovation, and that's a high-risk business. You're looking at diversified bets. You're looking at really supporting these people trying to create the future and disrupting what exists. But on the other side, we often hear private equity in a general world. You do have large operating businesses today that are challenged by the new economy, and they have to reinvent themselves. Private equity plays a real role in that segment. Very traditional businesses today are having to implement AI programs, new infrastructure programs, new CapEx investing, are getting disrupted by global players. So I would just say capital has a role to play at different parts of the journey of a company. It's not just early stage, and it's not just dividends in the late stage. You also have these periods of transformation. If I look at today, I think the private sector is as active as ever. Whether you're a large corporation or you're medium-sized or small corporation today, you are at the forefront of having to deal with changes. Whether it's AI, I would say the biggest themes we see in our field today is definitely AI across the board, applications within corporations. Data security and privacy is something that we kind of forget. It comes and goes. We hear of big cybersecurity deals here, but it is front and center, especially in the sovereignty-driven world, and I think that will become even more important in years to come. And last, climate tech, where I think Switzerland has a big role to play and has been a leader. So if you ask me, the private sector today is definitely very competitive, looking to adapt to the new world, and as active as ever in investing in these changes. We heard a lot of press this year about private equity being on the slowdown, it being a bit less relevant. I think these are just false headlines. The reality is it's still growing, it's still active, and I think that will keep on being the case. Now, when it comes to the public sector, my personal view is that, especially in Europe, we come out of 1 or 2 decades of the public sector almost seeing itself as the regulator of the private sector. There's these bad guys in the private sector polluting, doing all these bad things. Let's put rules, regulation, let's ring-fence them, without really, criticizing them openly, but that's our job as the public sector. I think that was fair. There was a time, maybe 20 years ago, where we needed to regulate pollution and do things. I think private sector is more aware than we think of the challenges and is part of the solution. And I think those days of the public really looking at the private as let's ring fence them, let's create, kind of barriers. I think these days are gone. Again, especially in the new world, and any active public sector actually needs to collaborate and work with the private sector as early as possible to understand where changes are coming, to understand what the priorities are, and to make choices, because not every country will be able to lead in every space and in every sector. So we need to make hard choices, and we need to make them now, and that's the collaboration. So the answer is, I think private sector is very active. Public has been, but just needs to probably shift priorities towards alignment with with the corporate industry and the actors in that field. That would be my take on it.
Thank you, Mr. Said. So we feel the urge to act as private actor, and this raises also the related topic of trust and legitimacy. So I'm turning to you, Mrs. Sabancı. We've talked a lot about trust when we prepared this panel. A philanthropic foundation, such as the one you chair, acts in public interest fields as a complement to government funding, using, in general, in many countries, tax-exempt funds. So the question of legitimacy, accountability of the action funded by a philanthropic actor becomes more and more under scrutiny, actually. So how can a philanthropic foundation such as yours ensure to align with local priorities, local needs, while demonstrating accountability?
Thank you, Sabrina, and thank you for inviting me to GESDA. And it is a great privilege to be able to talk about philanthropy. And I'm learning a lot now already from my distinguished panelists, from Stefan and Adam, about the capital and the private capital of the equation. I think I'm more in the philanthropy side of the equation, and which is good that we need to talk all these things together. So listening to both of my friends, I feel myself a very traditional philanthropist. So it is, of course, when we talk about, we are going through an extraordinary contrasts in the world. No need, we all know that, and we are here in GESDA, who have seen the need and bring us together. There is a remarkable progress in technology, but on the other hand, there is deepening inequalities and really hurtful for humanity, the times that we are going through. So it's not only climate change that our challenges. We all know these inequalities, disabilities are increasing. So we are going through very difficult times for the humanity. So here, GESDA Summit is, I think, very timely, and discussing these things together makes a lot of sense, because we cannot solve them with one institution or with one way of doing things. It's definitely that we need to renew the way we look at and the way we solve, we bring solution to the table. This needs to be rediscussed, redesigned, rethought about. But when it comes to trust and legitimacy is actually the foundation of philanthropy, is the currency of humanity, I call it. So trust, building trust, we all know, starts with being open, transparent, and having a defined, clear purpose for making life better, making people's lives better. This starts with this. And then you, of course, have to build up, look into the governance. Governance is crucial in all the foundations, and also when you are giving grants, which we do in Sabancı Foundation. Last 20 years, we have been giving grants to small, very small NGOs, and who are, most of them are first time doing projects in the field. We are guiding them, we are teaching them how to do a successful, impactful project. And we are walking together with them so that they can achieve the results. Until now, 250 projects we have done, NGOs have done, and we contributed as I said, it's not about money, it's about coaching, guiding, showing them how to be successful on the field. So it's more human touch. But in order to be successful, of course, defining what is needed is crucial. And alignment in the what needs to be done is the second crucial point, so that you can act together, activate, increase capacity, and make an impact. Making an impact in the lives of people is highly important, but it is not enough. It is the beginning, but we must look for a social change. We must look beyond making an impact on their lives. So there comes the education. Is a long-term thing. Also in my group, here my president and vice president is also here. We founded Sabancı University 25 years ago. I'm very proud that our university is one of the top research university institutions in my country. So when I read the Nobel Prize, Omar Yaki, just last few days we heard from him, a Nobel laureate for chemistry, who was born as a refugee family. His parents couldn't read or write. Yet, through education and sport, he became a world-renowned scientist. And as he said, science is the greatest equalizing force in the world. Which brings me back to GESDA, what we are doing here, the meaning of being here, and talking different aspects of giving, making an impact, making a change. It's obvious that the problem and the need is big. And with the changes in the world that we are living through, the problems are getting even bigger. But I have great trust in the science and technology development. Mm-hmm. We work with inequalities, I said. We also work with inabilities in our foundation. And it is obvious that even anything, any tool that you can think of that has a word smart in it right now is making a difference.
Thank you.
For the blind people, for the ears, for everything. But as I'm coming back, building a trust and legitimacy is, of course, as I said, first of all, being frank about it, having a clear purpose, and working on it, and long-term, having a long-term perspective. There's no social change can be achieved in a short period of time. We actually, when we start projects like that, we don't define time. We let it, we review every 2-3 years, but open-ended.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You raised an important topic, is the one of education. I think, Stefan, you have also a feedback, lessons learned to share maybe with us on education at a global scale. What is your experience in that field?
Well, I think education systems changes are some of the toughest systems to work in. And I think because of the systems dynamics that you have, the clients, which are the young people, they tend not to have a political voice, but it's actually sort of the client who has no voice. Then you have the parents who have usually a 30 to 40 year outdated model of what education actually was and should be. And then at the macro level, there isn't really agreement in most countries among the political spectrum of what education actually is for. What's the purpose of education? It's from an economic trajectory that we are kind of good economic citizens to very different views of what education. So based on that, it's really challenging. And as a result, within the financing of education, I mean, we have not figured out collectively how to bring private capital, impact capital at scale into the education space. We've completely failed. Partly because of, again, these system dynamics. You know, there were good examples in Kenya with Bridge Academy, which was kind of a low-cost private education that delivered really good results at very competitive kind of like costs compared to government schools. And because they were so successful, suddenly the teachers' union started to political lobby against Bridge Academy because they kind of made the government teachers look bad who didn't show up for work because they felt not enough paid, whereas the Bridge Academy teachers who got the same, they were actively engaged in delivering results. So, but I think what we do need, and there are increasing examples where actually through impact investing with patient capital, and I know Sandra is here, who is linked still closely with the Jacobs Foundation, that has shown that actually there are ways to address this. Or our own foundation just did a partnership with the SDG Impact Finance Initiative, SIFI, which is Swiss government, Luxembourg government, UBS, Optimus Foundation, and now the Korean are involved as well. And we did a call linked to education and looking for impact funds that are working in education and health within the Mekong region. And we were actually surprised on what, through the call, the quality of some of these funds that are really still at the low cost, sort of low scale level, are making differences using impact investing in education possible. But I think what it really is needed, and that's where we get now to the political challenges, that actually governments who are not really good in operating and implementing things. I just had a breakfast meeting this morning with the CEO of the Health Innovation Exchange. And he said, look, currently in Nigeria, as another example in health, the big hospitals are basically collapsing, but the government is not really willing to move into having private sort of social entrepreneurs running these places. The same with education. And what we really need is government to become an outcome payer of education outcomes and let impact entrepreneurs drive education and health solutions. Because if we manage that shift, that governments start to be more outcome payers for results delivered, the system starts to work through entrepreneurial approaches, where innovation then thrives, where technology and science then is being applied. And so we really need to have that shift. And some countries show promising results. Interesting country, for example, Vietnam. I must say it's really kind of bringing the role of government that's still very strong given its tradition, but it opens up space for private actors to transform the system.
Mm-hmm. So twice already we heard some insights about the role of government. So in your case, Stefan, maybe they should start being outcome-oriented. Adam Said, you mentioned that maybe it's time to stop being having this enemy relationship between private sector and public funding. I would like to dig in a little bit more in the time we have left. So how do you, Adam, see the role of a private investor next to public funding? We mentioned, it's also in the title of our panel today, government funding is stalling, is diminishing, government retreat into more sovereignty-driven priorities. So where do you see your role there. You said before private capital should be along the whole journey, not only at the beginning. So maybe you can explain a bit more to us.
Look, first, I really want to, there's something Stefan just said that I want to put out there. There's some places where we think government will do better than the private sector. I think there are some very rare cases where that's true. In most cases, I believe the private sectors and competitivity leads to good outcomes and leads to creativity. So I just want to insist on that, because sometimes we get, oh, well, the government will solve it. When I look at government spending over the last decades, it's definitely been funding operations rather than capex. And my big thing, especially in Europe, especially in Switzerland, is I think there's 3 areas where we definitely depend on the government and that we benefit from. Number 1, you mentioned education. We have a great education system. The best startups come out of the education system here in Switzerland, and we want to support that. That's something that we should keep investing in, keep supporting with private-public partnerships. I love the outcome-based financing idea. The second, which I think is often under-prioritized by government, is infrastructure. The reason why I insist on infrastructure is not just roads, right? Roads and trains. It's telecoms, it's data centers, it's airports, it's connectivity, it's the free movement of people, it's the speed at which we can get from Geneva to Zurich, for example. These type of things create economies, they change whole markets. And most importantly, infrastructure is the greatest common good to a population. I can give handouts to people who need support. That's great, but a good connectivity, a good infrastructure benefits everyone. Schools are part of the infrastructure of a government. The last thing I think, which I personally, and that's a personal belief, maybe a bit of outside of my scope as a private investor, is when I look at economics as a whole, one thing that's clear is that where there's a need, there should be a demand, right? And when there's a demand, there should be a supply. And ideally, that should be 1-to-1, right? The reality, it's not. The only gap why it's not is financing, right? The cost of financing has an impact on supply. So that's why you find that a bottle of Coca-Cola in most countries is cheaper than a bottle of spring water from the local region, right? Bottled. Why? Because Coca-Cola has cheaper financing, right? They can get their shipments, they can get their sugar, they can get it at the scale where local producers might not. And this is a reality today when you look at the emerging world and the developed world. There's definitely a greater need for housing in North Africa than there is in North America, but financing in North America is cheaper than it is in North Africa. So you have more supply. So if governments want to play a role, in my view, the greatest role they have is in the mechanism of financing and trying to make sure that the flows of capital and the cost of capital go where the need is, not just where the supply is. And we kind of have this self-reinforcing supply system that just kind of feeds itself. So this is, for me, the 3 priorities: education, infrastructure, and financing mechanisms. And the last thing I would say, and I'll just highlight that, is, in my opinion, we can learn a lot from emerging markets or developing markets. What Singapore has done, what Dubai has done in the last decades is just incredible. And I think we look at it as kind of anecdotal. You mentioned Vietnam also picking up. There's plenty of great example that the developed world should look at and say, okay, why am I not doing this? And I think COVID was a great reminder to everyone that, the world moves fast, it changes fast, and those who adapt win. Those who stall just, staying on the same place is being left behind. Mm-hmm. And I think that to me is the key reality. So in the private sector, again, we're following these trends, we're looking at that, but I think it's a continuous collaboration. Mm-hmm. So these would be my points.
Yeah, we hear the need of complementarity and also public entities ensuring the framework, right? The legal framework enabling private capital to act.
And private sector actors want regulation. Let's just be clear. Sam Altman has been saying, please regulate AI. Tell us what the rules are. Like, large industrial groups want regulation. What can I pollute? What can I do? The problem is it's when it's not clear or it changes all the time. And when it changes all the time, you can't adapt fast enough. And when it's not clear, it's a cloud where others take advantage of. So I'll just insist on that.
Yeah. Thank you. And then this leads to the question of collaboration. Ms. Sabancı, quickly, because I see time is running, but what is your experience as a philanthropic actor? Is it important to enhance multilateral collaborations, partnerships with other sectorial entities? Is this a way forward?
Of course, it's a way of forward, working together, collaboration, cooperation. We have this classical success triangle, that public, private, and philanthropy. Mm-hmm. Philanthropy is, of course, I listen with great interest, my friend Adam, but it is the human factor has to be somewhere in all this discussion, and the tremendous inequalities that we're talking about. For example, a gender inequality. Gender gap analysis lately showed that to achieve full gender parity, it's estimated that it will take 162 years. It's obvious that the problem is such huge that there's no way we can do it on our own. We cannot do a lot of things on our own, but collaboration and cooperation, when we talk about, we have to look at that with a new eye also, because it is obvious that what we have been doing is not much helping to solve the global problems. So keeping the global perspective and keeping the collaboration and always in mind in designing the solutions is, I think, is crucial.
Thank you. Any insight on collaboration, building partnerships from the other speakers?
Yeah, I do think that's absolutely critical. The more complex the world has become, the more no single actor can actually really find pathways out of this complexity. And I think GESDA is a very good example that brings together government, research agencies, it brings in private sector, civil society, and really looking ahead and anticipating what are some of these big challenges and looking at pathways through complexity. And I think the same is with, whilst we push very hard for impact investing, venture philanthropy, and business models, we have to acknowledge there's certain areas where there isn't a market. Like protecting children from sexual abuse, probably hard to find a business model that's scalable. There are many others, even, like the work that GESDA is doing, anticipation, long-term, pretty hard to develop a business model that has immediate. And foundations and philanthropy does actually have a role, especially with private capital that's moving into foundations, to look at some of these long-term bets that are high risk but have a huge societal upside. And so one of the areas we as a foundation are starting to explore, and I actually have a meeting right after, is the whole area of quantum biology, quantum and health. There are a lot of open questions which we are not sure, and the founders are willing to say, maybe this is a topic that in 100 years will have relevance and breakthroughs. But as a philanthropic actor, we can actually take these risks that government can't because it's taxpayers' money, corporates can't because it's too long-term. And so there is distinct space that all of us have, and only through collaboration and close working together can we really make a difference in terms of changing some of the system challenges that we currently face.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe we have a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. I see already a few hands raised. Thank you for the microphone. Maybe here on your right, madam, there is someone. Yeah.
Panel, thank you very much. My name's Alexander Evan Fortescue. I'm with the Halo Trust, we're the world's largest landmine clearance charity. This is such an important conversation to be having now as we see traditional donor governments repurposing, reprioritizing some of their spend. I'm interested in the view from the panel on the role of public-private partnerships, the role of innovative finance, and how those mechanisms can be used to address some of the world's challenges. Of course, Gavi springs to mind the incredible success that they've demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I pick up the second question and then you can answer. There is someone on your left. I'm sorry, I don't see very well with the light. Voilà.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lauriane Trimoula and I work for the Gallifrey Foundation. It's an ocean conservation organization. I would be very interested in understanding how do you explain that SDG 14, which is life below water, is one of the least funded of the SDGs. It's 0.00 something % of all funding. That's one question. Also because, if I may remind everyone, 50% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. So coming back to what Mr. Said just said about having a return, how can you put a price tag on the oxygen we breathe and biodiversity? So that's my question and my comment. And I would also like to say what you said about financial mechanism, absolutely true. Currently, plastics is heavily subsidized between $80 to $150 billion. That's why your Coca-Cola bottle is cheaper than bottled water. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe reactions from the speakers?
I'm happy to jump in as I was named there. No, first of all, how will I take this? I'm an optimist at heart, so that this will be my kind of approach to the role of government and what we can do here. The public-private partnership, the first question, I'll just say it's happening. It's happening in industries like where we are now. I just heard that the CERN got a 1.3 billion grant from the government of Europe, but also got 700 million from private sectors, right? When you talk about ocean, I know that some of the you have just down the lake here, some of the greatest donor in ocean conservancy, they're coming from the private sector, right? So maybe it's not included in some of the public environment, but I just want to remind that, you know, I'm not, I am a capitalist at heart. Private sector has a role. I definitely agree that there is rules and regulation that are needed to, for gender equality, for sex trafficking, for all that. But the greater impacts do come from economic and these financial structures that can really drive the change. So this is, to me, key. And I think this is the biggest lever we have. And education. All these things get treated by good education and spread education globally. And I think the areas where we have the biggest people left behind, or areas or countries where it's really, so they're struggling, it starts with the education system. So that's why I put it front and center. I would go back to the financial mechanisms and the cost of financing to solve the ocean issues. And I definitely think we're not taxing properly some of the negative impacts that companies bring on the air, on plastics, or on other industries. But I'd love to hear others.
We're running out of time, but maybe quick insight.
Well, maybe just on the oceans. I mean, that's part of the tragedy of the commons. But it's really worth to look at the Builders Vision, this kind of fund that uses systemic investing for the oceans that Lucas Walton actually is driving, and there is Transcap did a case study on actually the oceans using a systemic investing lens, where you really look at how investment into private markets, private companies, but as well then the research, the advocacy, up to civil society engagement, the fishing communities, etc., really looks at it from a whole system in terms of how can you actually address one of the areas of that's the tragedy of the commons. And to the other question related to private-public partnerships, I think we are increasingly seeing that we have increasing people that understand the different sectors, and the government speaks a different language, has different accountability, so does private sector and so does civil society. And we actually need people who can navigate and translate these kind of conceptual frameworks to have successful. And it does take a little bit longer, but it is a great African proverb that said if you want to go far, you have to go together. If you want to go fast, you basically don't go very far. So it's kind of like there is a bit of a trade-off between speed in terms of private-public partnership. But if it's done at scale, within a good understanding of the system, it can be hugely transformative.
Thank you.
I agree with Stefan. I was just going to give the same example, but about cooperation, it's obvious that the time that we are living in, we need increasing role for the capital flow, private capital flow, to solve problems. So the cooperation between the government, public and the private sector is more crucial than the past. But the roles needs to be defined clearly. Private sector bringing capital, rightly expected results. But when you're expecting social change, I must emphasize again, if the goal and the KPI is social change and social development, we need to put the right KPIs to the flow of capital. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we've reached the end of our interesting conversation. We heard the importance of acting as a private actor with grants over long term, facing important core issues such as education, but also using the capital. And we also heard about the importance of achieving maybe sustainable business model, still while recognizing that in some areas there is no market. And we also heard about the importance of collaboration, of being complementary to the state action, and also the importance that the public sector ensure mechanism for financing and ensure that the cost of financing is well, equitable and the right way to proceed. Well, I would like to thank you very much, our three speakers, Stefan, Germann, Güler, Sabancı, Adam Saing. Thank you, the participant in the room online, for joining us today. And I think on the screen will appear a QR code for the survey. So please take a minute for a feedback survey for GESDA. It is very useful. So thank you very much. I think there is a coffee break to pursue this interesting conversation.